Big Mac Reads Something Purple by Bad Horse. There was a knock on the library door. Twilight and the three fillies stopped talking and looked up. "Hold on, girls," Twilight said, and went to answer the door. A big red stallion stepped through the doorstep. "Hi, Big MacIntosh," she said. He said nothing, just looked into her eyes for a moment, and then looked away and chewed a little faster on the wisp of a straw in his mouth. "Apple Bloom," Twilight called, "your brother's here to pick you up." "Aw, Mac!" Apple Bloom protested. "Do I have to leave already?" "Nope," Big Mac said, stepping into the library. He went over to a corner of the room and sat down to wait, watching Twilight and the fillies. "Oh," Twilight said, "Big MacIntosh, if you don't mind, can you watch the girls for a bit while I trot over to the mayor's? I said I'd give her my comments on her speech for tomorrow's Science Day celebration." "I reckon," he said. "I know. Why don't you read him a story?" Big Mac stopped chewing on his straw. "Read?" "A story. Something nice." "Ah!" Skulu interjected. "Something exciting." "But not too exciting," Twilight added. Something romantic," Sweetie Belle said. "But not too romantic," Twilight added. Apple Bloom frowned at Twilight. Something responsible and boring," she said. "But not too." "You got me, Apple Bloom. I'll be back in a jiffy. Thanks so much, Big Mac." There was a scroll already neatly tied and waiting on the shelf by the door, and she wrapped it in a purple magic glow and headed out the door. Big Mac looked at the three fillies staring back at him. He turned and looked to the books surrounding him, row after row, and then back at the fillies. "So, are you gonna read us a story?" Apple Bloom asked. "You've never read me a story before." Big Mac walked over to the nearest bookshelf. He brought his head up to close to the books lined up there, and his lips moved slowly as he scrutinized the words written on the bindings. Then he carefully bit down on a tall, thin book with a lavender cover. He carried it over to the table and set the book respectfully down onto it. "What you got?" Apple Bloom asked. "A book." "What kind of book?" "A purple one." Sweetie Belle giggled. "You're funny, Big Mac. What's it about?" Big Mac wiped his hoof off on his flank, then carefully opened the cover and began turning the pages. He stared down at the words, focusing intently on them. He looked up at the fillies, who were waiting expectantly. He looked down at the book again and sighed. "Ain't you gonna read it?" Apple Bloom asked plaintively. "Yup," he said, setting his mouth in a determined line. He sat down behind the table. "It says, 'This here's the story of the smartest mare in the world.'" You mean in Equestria? Skulu asked. "Wouldn't that be Princess Celestia?" Sweetie Belle asked. "I'm just saying what it says here," Big Mac declared. "Says she was the smartest mare in the world, and just knew about everything. Why, if she didn't know it, it probably weren't even worth knowing." "Where is she?" asked Apple Bloom. He peered at the book again. "Says she lived in a big city with lots of other smart ponies and studied magic because she was a unicorn." "Oh, was it Canterlot?" Sweetie Belle asked. "Well, it says here it had streets made all of stone, so they never got muddy, and the streets were full of carriages with real enamel painted on them, and the carriages were full of fancy dressed ponies going to a fancy dress up balls. It says it had snooty rich ponies and them working ponies would had last on our farms, all living pushed up against each other like apples in a barrel." "Sounds like Canterlot, all right," Apple Bloom said. "But this mare," he said slowly, "she didn't care nothing about the fancy dresses, nor about the fancy carriages, nor about the fancy balls. She just read and studied all day. Then she'd light a candle and read and study some more." "Boring," Skulu said. Big Mac's ears rose sharply, but he just kept reading. "One day, she'd read all the books in the city." "No pony could read all the books in Canterlot," Apple Bloom objected. There's thousands and thousands of them. Says who? Big Mac demanded. Twilight. Big Mac considered this. Well, he said, if Twilight knows how many books there are in Canterlot, she must have seen them all. Ain't that right? I guess, Apple Bloom said. And you've never seen Twilight see a book and not read it? No, she admitted. That proves it then. And so, once this pony had read all the books in the city and learned everything there was to learn there, she went over to the little city to see what they knew there. And they didn't know a lot, but she liked it anyway and stayed there. The end, Skulu said. Now read something more exciting. And romantic, Sweetie Belle added. You keep your hooves on the ground, Big Mac said. This story ain't got monsters and magic and all that kind of stuff. And romance? Sweetie Belle asked. Big MacIntosh blushed slightly. I don't rightly know about that. Of course there's no romance, Skulu said. Who's gonna fall in love with an egghead? Big Mac clapped his hoof on the table. It made a very loud sound in the library. Sorry, he said sheepishly. He cleared his throat. Says here, there's a fella who was sweet on her. Probably lots of fellas. It says all that on the first page? Apple Bloom asked, stepping up to take a closer look. Big Mac turned the page. It says how once there was a dragon that took to flying over to the town and scaring every pony. Not a nice one like Spike, but a big mean looking one, with claws like plow teeth and teeth like bigger plow teeth. And she rounded up her friends and went off after it, even though she was just a little thing. Sweet, Skulu said. What about romance? Sweetie Belle asked. I said I don't know about no romance, Big Mac said. You said there was a feller who was sweet on her, Apple Bloom said. I only read that part because you pestered me about it. What do you mean? Skulu demanded. It's a story. You start at the beginning and read until you get to the end. I don't see why, Big Mac said. When I've got this big old story spreading out all over the place. What about the fellow who was sweet on her? Sweetie Belle insisted. Probably just another egghead, Skulu said. He weren't no egghead, Big Mac said. He was a bricklayer. He was kind of a big fella and pulled loads of bricks around and spent all day stacking them up in rows, neat like a honeycomb. Well, that's silly, Sweetie Belle said. Why would they fall in love? How would they even know each other? Big Mac frowned and considered this obstacle for several moments. It was a very small town, and every pony knew every pony else, he finally said. Every pony liked her, on account of her being smart, but a real helpful like instead of snooty. She said she was a solid worker just like him, reliable. They'd both work from sun up till past sunset, and she was brave. She could stand up in front of a big crowd of ponies and talk, and even tell them what to do, and never be afraid of sounding stupid. And every pony would listen to her, even the mayor. So that's why he liked her, Sweetie Belle said. But why would she just like him? Big Mac blinked at the book. He turned a few pages. Well, he finally admitted, I don't rightly know. I don't buy it, Skulu said. The smartest man in the world wouldn't marry a bricklayer. They don't have to get married, Sweetie Belle said. She looked up airily, clapping her front hooves together. She could fall for these great brawny muscles, and they could have a passionate fling. This story ain't nothing like that, Big Mac spluttered. Kinda seems like a stretch, Apple Bloom said. Why, it would be like you hitched up with Twilight. All three of the fillies giggled mightily at this, and Skulu lay down and slapped her one wing on the floor repeatedly. Big MacIntosh didn't seem to see the humor at first, but after a bit he grinned weakly along with them. Their laughter was interrupted by Rarity, who had come to pick up Sweetie Belle. She scratched her hooves daintily on the mat and came in. Why, Big MacIntosh, she said, craning her neck forward to verify that the big stallion was in fact sitting in front of a book. Are you reading it? The Girls Are Humorous story? I'm afraid so, Miss Rarity. Come on, Apple Bloom. There's work to do. I've been here far too long already. He closed the book carefully. I'm sorry it was such a silly story, kids. Oh, that's okay, big brother, Apple Bloom said. It was nice to do something together. Yeah, Scooter said. It was fun to listen to you read. You've got a funny way of doing it. Big Mac just chewed on his straw a little more vigorously and didn't say anything else. Everybody left the library and headed their separate ways. Some time later, Twilight returned and found the lavender-colored book still lying on the table. She read the title. I don't think there was any pony else in this town who'd be interested in neuroponynomic theory. She thought as she picked it up and returned it to its proper place, that perhaps some pony new in town, some young stallion perhaps, had been there reading it, but had been unable to check it out because he didn't have a library card. Perhaps he would return for it tomorrow. Oh, do you have have you read Padoa Klapa? She'd ask casually. Why no, he'd say. Do tell me about it. She pushed some of the books on that shelf and pulled on others, humming quietly to herself, until they were all flush with each other again. The end.